Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another week of our Cybersecurity Executive Brief. I am Corey Wolf, Director of Offensive Security at Risk 360, and today is Wednesday, January 22nd, 2025. Don't forget, 2025. It usually takes me until March to actually start writing 2025, to start writing the new year. But it is a new year, and that means in 2024, we saw all kinds of different things going on in cybersecurity. So we will be holding a 2024 Cybersecurity Year in Review on January 30th, Thursday, 1 p.m. Eastern Time, where we will review the year. We will talk through lessons, trends, some of the biggest breaches we saw. We'll talk through some of the biggest trends that we saw. And we'll also look towards the future and see what we think might be happening next. So I do invite you to join us there. It will be Thursday, January 30th, 1 p.m. Eastern. I will add a link in the description so that you can join us. I hope to see you there. In news this week, the Department of Justice has confirmed that they have made an arrest on a hacker that was part of, so last year, Snowflake, what was referred to as a Snowflake breach, was talked about a lot. Pretty big issue, pretty big incident that included lots of different companies, AT&T being probably the biggest, Verizon as well, I believe, Santander Bank, Lending Tree. There's a couple more down here, Ticketmaster, and at least 160 other companies. So this is the one where the Snowflake instances were just getting absolutely annihilated. And this turned out to be a group of hackers, one from Canada who was arrested a few months back in 2024. However, the U.S. has made an arrest. I'm going to get his last name wrong, but Cameron John Wagenius. I'm not sure how you say that. But interestingly enough, he was a U.S. Army communications specialist, and they arrested him in Texas. So they have confirmed that this week that they did make an arrest. He was essentially doxxed by Brian Krebs, the legendary cybersecurity journalist and researcher. He basically found out that through various means that one of the hackers reported that one of the hackers responsible for the Snowflake incident was in fact a U.S. Army, a member of the U.S. Army stationed in Korea. Krebs just did a phenomenal job of identifying this person and identifying where he was located. There was an arrest that we talked about on the cybersecurity brief of a gentleman in Canada. When that gentleman in Canada was arrested, this Cameron, not going to try and say his last name again, this Cameron started a post on threat actor forums that the data was still available and for sale, taunted the federal government to try and find him. They found him and they arrested him. The thing about this is that all these companies were breached because of insecure Snowflake instances. So what these gentlemen did when they conducted these, breaches, was there's things called info stealers, which are basically pieces of malware that once installed on a machine just gather information. Literally, that's it. They'll put in keyloggers to see when you add a username and password into a website, and when they see that happens, they'll ship it off to some C2 somewhere for the threat actors to log that information. They will grab things like cookies, session tokens, anything that they can find of that's sensitive information. They will gather this from the victim machine and send it off to the attackers. Info stealers are definitely one of the more popular methods to gain sensitive information. Info stealers are definitely on the rise. They have been over probably the past 2 years. You've started to see them be used more and more and more by threat actors. And so what happened with the Snowflake incident was info stealers, through various means, these attackers gathered username and password combinations for Snowflake, and they tried to log in. That was it. They went to the Snowflake instance and they tried to log in with these credentials. The MFA was not enabled on the Snowflake instance. Network isolation and firewalling and IP blocking and restrictions and that kind of stuff was not enabled on the Snowflake instances. So every single company that you see here, we called out a bunch of them plus 160 others. None of them had reasonable cybersecurity practices on their Snowflake instance. There was no MFA, there was no additional controls in place, and so these threat actors they had a way to automate it. Uh, Unfortunately, they called it snow rape. Which they basically had a way to automate it. They would log into the account, they would see all the tables in the Snowflake instance, they would exfiltrate all the data, and then they would move on to the next one. Yeah, I mean, I think is this what I say? In part by using passwords stolen from employee computers with malware, info stealers. Most of the affected Snowflake customers were not using multi-factor protection, which Snowflake did not require of its customers at the time. It does require it now. Snowflake actually has some really good documentation about securing your Snowflake instance. Yeah, that's basically what happened there. It was username, password, that was it, and there were no other protections in place. And as you can see, at least 160 other companies had their data stolen. The AT&T one, I believe the threat actors in this case claimed to have call logs from Donald Trump, Kamala Harris, a bunch of other high-profile people in the U.S., all because these companies they didn't secure their Snowflake instance. So they made it real easy for these threat actors to do this. This is basic stuff here. So, but yeah, they did make an arrest. OPSEC is hard. That's the hardest part of being a threat actor is OPSEC, your operational security, because people like Brian Krebs and other OSINT sleuths will be able to find you, whether you like it or not. So, yeah, they made an arrest. The federal government continues to go after lax cybersecurity in different companies. In this case, the FTC had filed a complaint against GoDaddy for alleged lax data security for its website hosting services. So this is specific to their shared hosting. So GoDaddy, of course, offers all kinds of different services. In this case, it's specific to their shared hosting. They filed a complaint, I believe, in 2023. But their complaint goes on to say that since 2018, GoDaddy has failed to implement reasonable and appropriate security measures to protect and monitor its website hosting environments for security threats, and misled. So this is a similar tone that the SEC took with oh god, I'm blanking on it. SolarWinds. This is a similar approach. The SEC said that SolarWinds misled shareholders by saying that they had reasonably secure cybersecurity practices. Most companies have some sort of statement of security or cybersecurity, statement, something. But the SEC was saying that SolarWinds put on their website and other marketing materials, and I believe in shareholder documents, 10Ks, that kind of thing, 10Qs, that they were secure, they took reasonable measures, etc. Of course, SolarWinds, one of the most serious incidents ever. And so that was the SEC's argument. Listen, they were saying publicly that they were secure. Meanwhile, behind closed doors, they weren't doing, what they should have been doing, which, I don't know, could be, there's lots of ways to go about that. But so this is a similar thread that the FTC is pulling on, where they're saying that GoDaddy misled customers about the extent of its data security protections on its website hosting services. There is a settlement order where the FTC is requiring GoDaddy. The FTC is requiring GoDaddy to establish a comprehensive data security program that is similar to those in other FTC cases, including the recent settlement with Marriott International. So if you're not aware, Marriott International and GoDaddy have been getting popped like once a year for a long time now. In the case of Marriott, it was found that they basically didn't do anything. I mean, for all intents and purposes, they barely did anything. Marriott's cybersecurity was bad, and they got in trouble for it with the FTC, which they did. As you can see here, they did have a recent settlement. But it looks like this has actually been ordered. So if we look at dark reading, just a little, same kind of stuff, just different story. But FTC found GoDaddy failed to manage assets and software updates, assess risk to shared hosting services, adequately log and monitor any security-related events, and segment its shared hosting from insecure environments. That hurts just to read that. So they have been ordered to basically implement a real information security program that a company of their size should probably have. We can look at the complaint, which I did pull up, and there's a couple things I want to call out. Sorry, forgive my scrolling here. Give me a second. So let's see. GoDaddy, one of the largest website hosting companies in the world. So this is the actual complaint that the FTC had filed. And where is it? Where's the part I want to call out? Okay, here we go. Paragraph 6. In fact, GoDaddy's data security program was unreasonable for a company of its size and complexity. Despite its representations, GoDaddy was blind to vulnerabilities and threats in its hosting environment. Yeah, okay. But here's where we want to see. In particular, GoDaddy failed to A, inventory and manage assets, B, manage software updates, C, assess risks to its website hosting services, D, use multi-factor authentication, E, log security-related events, so they were not doing any logging apparently in this environment of events of any kind, monitor for security threats, including, that's the next one, including monitor for security threats, including by failing to use software that could actively detect threats from its many logs, and failing to use file integrity monitoring. I mean, not that many, I guess they do. G, segment its network, and H, secure connections to services that provide access to consumer data. So if we were to take all of these right now and boil it down, what the FTC is saying is that GoDaddy had a completely flat network that did not have a SOC SIM or any sort of network monitoring going on, did not have multi-factor authentication, and did not manage an asset inventory of any kind, which it kind of lines up considering all the breaches that they've had just over the past 5-6 years. Kind of lines up. So this is interesting that a company of this size, and Marriott, I guess too, this is interesting that a company of this size has literally done nothing for cybersecurity. I mean, it's just nothing. So that was the bulk of the FTC's complaints. Completely flat network, which is a big no-no. When they didn't have MFA and they weren't logging or monitoring network traffic. The rest of this is just exhibits of, again, the FTC basically saying that, hey, they said to consumers that they had good security when in fact they had terrible security. But one other thing that I want to call out before we go, which is where I was when we switched to this tab. I think it's the next one, which me as an OffSec person, man, I hear you. Where is it? Okay, here we go. GoDaddy has failed to conduct regular penetration testing for the shared hosting environment. Penetration testing evaluates how a secure environment is against unauthorized access or exploitation by attempting to compromise it. Okay. Since 2015, GoDaddy conducted a single penetration test for each segment of the shared hosting environment, which failed to identify vulnerabilities described in H&I below. So since 2015, they did a single pen test for each segment of the shared hosting environment. Yikes. And not only that, but my guess is that they were probably doing check-the-box pen testing because of the FTC threw in here, which failed to identify the vulnerabilities described in further paragraphs below. So they have been ordered to implement a reasonable and robust information security program, which they probably should do anyways. What are you going to do? So that's it for this week. Again, I hope to see you on the 30th, Thursday, for our 2024 Cybersecurity Year in Review. I hope you have a great rest of your week, an excellent weekend, and guess what? I'll see you here next week. Speak soon.